Where's Gil? We need Gil.
Everything you know. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, Jabosai, good morning. Let's begin. So we are picking up. Today's daf is Pei Vav. We are picking up 86. We are picking up the last line of Peham at base 85b, right by the two dots. I want to thank Yehuda for giving the shir yesterday. And let's go. Ein Revi and Lomi Beis Hazon. So remember again, the Mishnah explained all the various requirements for shemen, for oil. Or it's not just any kind of oil, it's not just the first pressing of oil, but the olives must come from a particular type of growth. So the Mishnah goes on. So the Divrei HaMaskil over here is that ultimately, again, you cannot go ahead and bring olives that came from a fertilized field. But the Gemara actually transitions to a different topic. Vatanyo, ein meviin an pakton vim top of peva vim heavy puzzle. Supposed to say, if you remember again, the Mishnah spoke about the fact that you are not supposed to bring olives that are quote unquote anpakton. But if you went ahead and you brought anpakton olives, ultimately again, the Mishnah says that it's kosher. The Gemara says here we have a brisa that says that it's possible. Now remember again, how did Rashi define anpakton? So in the Mishnah Rashi says mashalonis bashal yofa. Rashi explains it ultimately again as olives that are not fully ripened. Well, again, we'll get into this in just a bit more. The point the Gemara is making over here is that the Brisa contradicts the Mishnah. Whereas the Mishnah says that if you used it ultimately, again, you shouldn't, but b'diavad, if you did, it's kosher. The Brisa says you shouldn't use it, and if you brought it, ultimately it's possible. Why? Because ultimately, again, I will say, Rashi says over here, Sraf, actually look at Rashi Kisveyad, the Rashi on the bottom, Moel Ba'almo. It's simply it's a what's the word? A secretion. A secretion. It's just simply a secretion, right? In other words, it's not called oil; it's called an olive secretion. So you know, so we'll say. So therefore, again, what we see over here is as follows: the Brisa says that you shouldn't use this anpakton because really it doesn't have the status of oil, which is actually quite interesting. So what the Gemara is saying over here, according to the Brisa, is not everything that comes out of an olive has the status of oil. This anpakton has the status of a secretion. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef lo kasha. So we'll say the problem is now we have a contradiction. We have a contradiction, right? We have on one hand the Mishnah telling me that I can't use I shouldn't use anpakton, but bidi eved, if I did, it is kosher. Versus the Brisa that tells you that it is possible across the board. So the Gemara says, lo kasha, haribichia, haribshim bari. But we'll say it's not a contradiction. Differences of opinion. One is the opinion of Rabbi Chia, one is the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel Silber. Rabbi Chia, Zarikle, because also Rabbi Chia used to throw out the anpakton. He would not go ahead and hold on to it. Interesting of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Mat Bilbe. So we'll see, interesting that Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi used to hold on to it. Not only would he hold on to it, but what? He would use it as a dip for his food. So apparently he would actually go ahead and use it as olive oil. So the Gemara says, and how do you remember who held which? Listen to this, Rabbi Osai. V'simonich ashirim mekamtsin. Well, so the way to remember this is, now literally translated what this means is, sometimes wealthy people are stingy. They'll say, but actually it doesn't really mean stingy. What it means is that sometimes wealthier people are more careful with their resources than people who are not as wealthy. So also, what does this mean? Reb Shimon Rebbe, right? If I look at Rashi just a moment, Ashira Mekamtzin, look at Rashi Kisveyad. It's in the bottom part of Rashi, the first wide line. Ashira Mekamtzin, Rebbe Shimon Shahaya ben Nasi. Remember again, Rebbe Huda Nasi was the Nasi. His son was Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon was the ben Nasi. Va'ashir Haya, he was very wealthy, obviously. Hayakam sova ochal, but he was very careful with his resources. So even this anpaktin, he would not just throw away, but rather he would go ahead and use it as a dip. Whereas apparently the less wealthy Rabbi Chia would be much quicker to discard. I will say, this, by the way, is just an interesting yesod in general. Where is the first time we see this concept ultimately, again, of the wealthy being careful with their resources, right? So Yaakov Avinu, right? We see again that what happens. The pasuk says, "Vayivaser Yaakov levado vayavik Yishimo." Yaakov Avinu was all alone. That's when the Sar Shal Esav starts up with him. Rashi HaKadosh quotes, "Why was he alone? Shachach pachim kitanim." He went ahead and he forgot, the biblical equivalent of his Tupperware, right? He forgot his Tupperware on the other side of the Ma'avar Yabok, so he goes back. So the Maharal, many ask, just leave it alone. You're a wealthy guy. If you got plenty of money, what are you worrying about the Tupperware? So I say, because again, sometimes when a person is blessed with wealth, they realize that they don't deserve those brachos. And then, most of us don't deserve all of the brachos we get from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When a person has an abundance of bracha, sometimes it becomes even clearer to them what a beneficiary of divine kindness they are. And so they begin to see that everything they have, even the smallest of items, is such an incredible gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you get a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it doesn't matter the value, the monetary value of that gift. You value it because it comes from the Rebbe Shalom. Like lahavdil, if your child goes ahead and makes you something, and they bring it home. So we'll say, so again, what's the relative value of that object, that project your child made in school? Right? Let's say, let's be honest. This is a men's shir, right? It's junk. It's objective junk, right? It's garbage. You're wondering to yourself, oh my gosh, like how long are we actually hold on to this for, right? So again, but yet what? But at the end of the day, it's so incredibly meaningful. Why? Because it comes from someone who you love. When it comes to gifts from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the relative value of those gifts that's not what's important. What's ultimately important is that the Rebbe Shalom gave me something. That sometimes, interestingly enough, you would think intuitively that the less a person has, the more they value what it is that they have. But the Gemara is pointing out sometimes it's just the opposite. Sometimes a person who is blessed with much and realizes, you know what, I don't deserve all of these brachos. So they begin to see everything they have, from the most expensive item to the least expensive item, are all a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why you'll see as the Gemara describes this dynamic. Sometimes ashirim mekamtsin. It's not because the wealthy person is stingy, that's counterintuitive, is that the wealthy person realizes that even the anpakton, right, even this little stuff, this secretion from the olive, that's also from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore must be cherished. Good, weiter. So the Gemara just points out over here, Shisha Chadashim Mishem and Amar. So we'll say pasuk from Megillas Esther, right? So when talking about the beauty pageant that Achashverosh had for the women of the kingdom, so it said that they would go ahead and anoint themselves with oil, Shemen Hamor, for 6 months. My Shemen Hamor, what is the meaning of this Shemen Hamor? Rav Huna Bar Chia Amar Satachta. It's this Satachta oil. What's Satachta? So Rashi on top, Rabbosai says Satachta Shekorin Balsama. Balsam oil. Balsam oil. So the Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba Amar Shemen Zayis Shelo Hevi Shlish. Others say no, it's actually again olive oil from olives that did not yet reach 1/3 of their olive maturation. We'll say that's why this Gemara is being brought down over here, because Rashi in the Mishnah explains that actually on Paktan, this oil secretion came from olives that were not fully matured. So you see over here, Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba understands that even those secretions that come from an olive that wasn't yet 1/3 mature are also considered to be chashiv. That's why at the end of the day, the Mishnah paskins, which is how the Rama paskins as well, which this on Pakdun, although lechatchila it should not be used for shemen in the Beis HaMikdash, if at the end of the day you used it, it is still kosher, because we paskin that it still has the identity of oil and not simply as a secretion. Ta'ina mi Rabbi Yehuda Omer an Pakdun Shemen Zayis Shlo Hevi Shlish. Rabbi Yehuda says, what's on Paknun? This is this olive oil that comes from olives that have not yet reached 1/3 of their maturity. Lama Sachinoso. So why do some people shmear it on themselves? Shemeshir es haseir uma'adin es habasar. So apparently I will say the power of this on Paknun or on Paktun, different versions over here, is not as much as in its value as a food item, but rather ultimately has this value in terms of it makes the skin beautiful, serves apparently as a depilatory as well, removing hair. Ein mavi'in min hagargarin. So what's in the Mishnah said, you cannot go ahead and bring from gargarin. Now gargarin normally means pits. In this context, what it means are very, very, very small olives. So you don't go ahead and bring ultimately you don't use olive oil in the Beis HaMikdash. That comes as a result of what we call these olive berries, right? These very small olives that were soaked in water in order to extract the oil. So Tan Rabbanon, so the Gemara quotes a brayso, Shemen Zayis Kavush. So we'll say, these are actually interesting cases. Shemen Zayis Kavush means you took olives and you pickled them. Kavush means to pickle something. You pickle them, extracting the oil like that. Shaluk, or you boil the olives. Sharoy, or you soak the olives. Vishal Shmarim, or ultimately olive dregs. Vishal Reachra, or olives that have a foul odor. Lo Yavi. We'll say these items should not be used to produce olive oil for the Beis HaMikdash. Vim heavy, but if you use them, pasul. Ultimately, again, any oil that comes from these type of olives will be possible. So, by Rabbi asked the kasha, the same kasha you saw on yesterday's daf. Hekdishu ma'ushi yelake alav mishum balmum. Well, so listen to this. So, what happens if you were makdish these flawed olives? So, are you in violation for being makdish a balmum? We saw this already in yesterday's daf, right? That there's a prohibition to go ahead and be makdish a balmum animal. So, the shaila is, if you're makdish these items, which are unfit for use in the Beis HaMikdash, so do you get malchus, so to speak? Meaning, are you in violation, ultimately, for being makdish a balmum? Kevon the pasul, ke balmum dami. So do we say that since these olives are unfit for use, just like a blemished animal, therefore the same way you'll get malchus for being makdish a balmum for consecrated purposes. So if you're makdish blemished olives, it's like being makdish a balmum, and you also get malchus. O dilma ain't balmum elba mehema. Or do we say no? Balmum, Rabbi say, is what? Balmum is a din in an animal. It's not a din in anything else. So therefore, maybe halacha l'maaseh again, I shouldn't get malchus for it. To which the Gemara says, teku. Enachinam will have to leave this one for Eliyahu Navi. He'll answer it for us. Mishnah Shlosha Zeisim. So we'll say still on the topic of olive oil. Shlosha Zeisimim. There are 3 different olive harvests. 3 different times that we harvest the olives for oil purposes for the Beis HaMikdash. So the Shlosha Zeisim Hein. Ubahen Shlosha Shmanim. So we'll say, interestingly enough, 3 times, 3 intervals in which we harvest the olives, and each one of those olive harvests themselves produces 3 different grades of oil. Now, again, so to be clear, we harvest the olives at 3 different times, and each of those harvests produce 3 different grades of oil. So the Gemara says, listen to this. This is really interesting. No? Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. Hazayis Harishon. Let's say, again, if you think about it, but I just want to point out, you see, we live in such a consumer age that if you want something, what do? Right? Amazon. And if you want it now, it's Amazon Prime, right? Meaning, we have no hasaga as to what actually goes in to making stuff. Because for us, again, the only shaila is how quick can it get to me? We will say you have to understand something. Part of the beauty of avoda is the amount of effort that goes into the back end of things. It's not just about showing up in the Beis HaMikdash. It's about it's literally, again, from the beginning of the process to the Mizbeach. That first, it's an incredible, that's the din in avodas Hashem also. Just like I'll just give you it very quickly. That's why, again, tefillah, what is it? Remember in the Mishnah Maseches Brachos? Remember brachos? Yes. Remember brachos, right? So I said, well, we're going to be back there soon. But understand, what did the Mishnah say? Chasidim harishonim hayushoen sha'achas lifnei tefillah. You want to have a meaningful tefillah experience? Again, it was an hour of meditation beforehand. The idea is, the yesod in avodas Hashem is the same. That if you want any meaningful experience, it's not just the experience that has to be concentrated and beautiful, it's the preparation that has to be concentrated and beautiful as well. That's the take-home message of all of this. Do you realize how much time we're spending on olive oil? How much time we're spending on olive oil? Because you want to have a meaningful mincha experience? You want to have a meaningful menorah experience? Well, the shemen from the beginning has to be kadosh v'tahar. Incredible metaphor in life. You want to be successful in anything, it's not just about showing up, it's about making sure that the back end, you're preparing on the back end as well. So shlosha zeisim heim. So we'll say ultimately, again, there are 3 different olive harvests. Oben shlosha shmanim, and each of them produced 3 different grades of oil. Here we go. Hazayis harishon, megargaro berosh hazayis. So both say the first olive harvest, interestingly enough, took place. It's fascinating. You didn't harvest the olives grow on a tree, right? You didn't harvest all of the olives at once. the first thing you would do is you would harvest the olives on the top of the tree. Which Rabbi say, actually, we're going to see is very intuitive. Why? Why the olives on the top of the tree? Because those are the ones that get the greatest exposure to sunlight. Therefore, those are the ones that were not mature. Ripe. Thank you. Those are the ones that were ripe first. So the first harvest takes place by the top of the tree. The Gemara says, and what would you do? So hazayis harishon megargaro berosh hazayis. You harvest the olives on the top of the tree. Now what happens? V'kotesh. We'll say kotesh literally means you take the olives and you pound them. V'nosin l'soch hasal. Then you go out and you put them into a basket. Rabbi Huda Omer Silos Hasal. Rabbi Huda says you wouldn't pack them in a basket, but rather what you would do is you would arrange them around the perimeter of the basket. So we'll say here they just have a machlokis in olive oil production, right? Did you just go out and pound it and just pack them into a basket, or did you arrange them around the side of the basket? Zerishon. But we'll say this was the first. So we'll say, so what would happen once you pounded it, you put it into a basket, and then I will say what would happen? What would happen? So you let nature do its work, and the olive oil would seep out of the olives, and you'd have another receptacle that ultimately would receive the olives. This is called the first. I will say this is also what we call virgin olive oil, which is the oil that comes out from the first pressing of the olives themselves. Next, what would happen next? So the Gemara says, "Zerishon chazer toin bekora." I will say the next thing you would do is you would place a heavy beam on top of the olives. Rabbi Huda Omer ba'avanim. Rabbi Huda says you wouldn't use a beam, but rather you would use stones. Zeh sheni. Rabbi Huda say this placing of the beam or of the stones was the second pressing of the olives. Okay, that's number 2. Chazer v'tachan. Then Rabbi Huda say you would go back. You would go back and pound the olives again and put the beams upon them again. Zeh shlishi. This ultimately, again, Rabbi Huda would be the third pressing. So interestingly enough, you see the first time the olives are pounded, placed into a basket, the oil that comes out of that, that's Rishon oil. Then you would go ahead and you would place something heavy upon the olives. Second time, machlokes, was it a beam, was it stones? The oil that comes out of that, that's the second pressing. And then you would go back and pound it and put the beam or stones on top of it again. That's the third pressing. Now we'll say, what's the chilik between if you are first pressing, second pressing, third pressing? Oh, harishon lemenorah. We'll say the halacha is, as we're going to see, you could only use first press oil for the menorah. The menorah, what we call virgin olive oil, right? That could only be used for the menorah. Vashar lemenachos. Rabbi say second and third pressings could ultimately be used for the menachos. Hasheni. We'll say what was the second harvest of the oil? End of the first wide line pevav and dalv. What was the end of the second? What was the second? Megago barosh hagag. We'll say interestingly enough, you would go ahead and you would collect the olives on the tree that were opposite the roof line. The roof line. So this again, and the roof line, v'kotesh. So we'll see again, you're taking off the olives sequentially, as we're going to see. You start with the olives on the top of the tree. Once you take those, you take the olives at the roof line. And again, it's the same process. The kotesh, you pound the olives. V'nosin l'soch hasal, you put them in a basket, and then you allow the olives, just the oil, to seep into another receptacle. Rabbi Huda Omer Silos says, Rabbi Huda says you wouldn't pack. You would not pack the basket, but rather, again, you would arrange the olives along the sides of the basket. Zer Rishon. They're both saying the oil that comes from this is called the Rishon oil. To'ein bakora, Rabbi Huda Omer ba'avanim zesheni. You would then take a heavy beam, or according to Rabbi Huda, rocks. You would place them on top of the olives, extract more oil. This was the sheni. Chozer v'tachan v'ta'an. Then you would go back again and pound the olives again, or put the beam on top of the olives again. This was the shlishi. Both say same halachas. Harishon the menorah, the oil that comes from the first pressing. This is good for the menorah. Vashar the menachos, and the other oils are both say, in other words, pressing for what comes from the second and third rounds. That's not good for the menorah, but it is good for the menachos. Shlishi. Both say, what about the third olive harvest? This is amazing. So both say, interestingly enough, if you look at Rashi for just a moment, Hazayis Hashlishi, both say, in the Rashi Kisve Yad, the bottom part of Rashi, it's 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up for the bottom. Hazayis Hashlishi, this is actually really interesting. Mashimulaki Papam Hashlishi, so both say, the olives that you are gathering from the third gathering, Ein Mispashali Olam, both say, apparently, those olives never fully ripened. So apparently, why did they never fully ripen? It appears that they just never got enough sunlight. So therefore, again, they were always considered to be somewhat underdeveloped olives. Shehem ha'anofim shetachas hagag she'im hachama noga bahen. So we'll see, interestingly enough, these were the olive branches that were underneath the roof line. So because of that, apparently they never really got sufficient sunlight, and therefore, again, they were somewhat underdeveloped. Now, again, as we're going to see, they still produce oil, but they were somewhat underdeveloped. Shlishi otno bebeis habad. So we'll say the third group of olives, you gather them, you put them in the pressing floor. Ad shi'elaki. So we'll say these olives, you prepare them a little bit differently. What you do is you gather them up, you heap them together bebeis habad in the press. Ad shi'elaki. And I'm going to say ad shi'elaki literally means until they spoil. What it means is the olives work is if you go, the same thing happens with grapes as well. If you gather them together, they generate a heat. That heat then causes some of the liquid to seep out. The Gemara calls that spoilage. But it's not really spoilage that it becomes bad, it's just the way the Gemara calls it. Uma'aleo, then after they go and they begin to generate moisture, you bring them up to the rooftop. Umenagvo, you dry them off, barosh agag. Kotesh, then you pound them. Shabbos said the idea over here is what you're doing with these olives, because they're somewhat underdeveloped, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to get them ready to dislodge the oil more easily. The way that happens essentially is, it's interesting, what nature didn't do, you're kind of going to artificially stimulate. So remember, these olives did not get enough heat from the sun. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating artificial heat by dumping them all together in the Beis Habad. They're going to generate this moisture, which is not really oil. That's why the Gemara calls it spoilage. Now they're ready to produce oil, but again, you want to get rid of the moisture. You take them up to the rooftop, you go ahead and you dry them off. Then after they're dried off, what do? Venos kotesh. Now you pound them. Venosin l'soch hasal, and you put them in the basket. Rabbi Yehuda omer sios hasal, and Rabbi say, now you get into the regular process. You put them in the basket. Rabbi Yehuda says the corners, sides of the basket, zerishon, and the oil that you produce from this batch is rishon. So Rabbi say, what you see from here is something very interesting, which is that what? Even from this third batch of oil, you can still produce virgin olive oil that we're going to see is good for the menorah. It just needs a little bit. This batch of olives, Rabbi say, needs a little extra TLC, right? This batch, it didn't get enough warmth from the sun, so what the sun didn't do, we are going to do. Toin Korah, Zerishon, Toin Makora, Rebidun Ba'avanim Zesheni. Then Abba say, again, you go ahead after the first process, you take the beam, Rabbi Yehuda says the stones, you produce the second stage of oil. Chazer v'tachan v'tan, then you pound them again, put the beam on them again, Zeshlishi, Harishon l'menorah, Vashar l'menachos. And Abba say, even in this case, from third batch olive oil, you could go, I should say, from third harvest olive oil, the rishon can be used for the menorah, and the rest of the stages for the menachos. Says the Gemara, but the Gemara has an interesting kasha. Megargaro tnan or megalgalo tnan. So I will say, how are we to read the Mishnah? Megargaro or megalgalo? Rabbi say, what's the chiluk? Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi in the Kisvei Yad, 6 lines up from the bottom. Megargaro tnan shalokate gargir kan. The gargir kan lefi shadayin ena mavushal. Or megalgalotanan. Shamaniach barosh hazayis achum avusha. So we'll say, interesting enough, the Gemara is asking the following kasha. When we speak about the first olive harvest, do we say megargaro? Now megargaro means we go up to the top of the tree, we pick the ripe ones, and we leave the unripe ones. Or do we read the Mishnah megalgalo, that you leave the olives on the top of the tree until when? Until they are all ripe and ready for harvesting. How should we read the Mishnah? So the Gemara quotes a Braisa. Tashma, the Sanya Shemen Zayis Mizeso. So what's the actually interesting case? If a person says Shemen Zayis, so Rashi says over here, bottom Rashi again, Kilomar, Hare Alai Shemen Zayis. If a person says, I hereby take upon myself an obligation to bring Shemen Zayis to the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say, what type of shemen does he have to bring? So the Gemara says, so yiyah shemen sheis bashal v'ismali shmano bo de bezayis. So we'll say the halacha is he could only bring it from olives which are ready to produce oil, olives which are sufficiently ripe to be able to actively produce oil. Mikan amru, from here we see shemen zayis rishon megalgelo berosh hazayis. So we'll say, what do you see from here? That when they harvest the initial harvest of olives, we'll say megalgalo. So we'll say, what does megalgalo mean? You do not go ahead and harvest the olives until when? Until all the olives on the top of the tree are ripe. Obviously, you will say all is a relative term. It doesn't mean every last olive. What it means is you don't go up to the top of the tree and pick one from here and pick one from here, pick one of the, and the other ones are underdeveloped. Rather, you wait until the overwhelming majority of the olives on the top of the tree are ripe, and then only then do you go ahead and harvest the olives. So the Gemara says, and we'll say now the Brisa pretty much repeats the Mishnah. The konsol beis habad, then you go ahead and you bring them into this press. The tochno berechaim, you go ahead and you press them ultimately again in the mill or in the press. The nosno basalin, you go ahead and you put them ultimately in the baskets. Shemen hayotzi mimenu, the oil that then comes out. Zeh hayarishon, this is called rishon oil. Next, ta'un bakora, you put the olives back under a heavy beam. Habima, shemen hayotzi mimenu, oil that comes out from that. Zeh hayasheni. V'chazar uparak v'tachan v'ta'an zehaya shlishi. And then Rabbi say you go back and you go ahead and you remove them from the press, pound them again, press them again. This was shlishi. Harish on the menorah, the first oil that came out of this was good for the menorah. V'ashar lemenachos, and the rest of the oil ultimately again was used for menachos. V'chein zayis sheni, the same thing was true with the second olive harvest. The zayis shlishi, what do you do with the third harvest? So I remember again, the first two harvests are pretty much the same. The third one was different, as you saw in the Mishnah. What do you do with the third one? Ot noba beis habad, you gather all the olives together in the press. Ad shi elake, until there is spoilage, which I will say means that until there's some type of olive secretion that's occurring. After that occurs, which means the olives are ripening artificially. Uma'ala l'rosh agag, then you bring this pile of olives to the top of the roof. Va'osa osa kimin tamra, you make it literally like a date, which I will say ultimately means wide on the top and smaller on the bottom. Ad sheyazuvu meimav, until again they begin to secrete their secretions. The konsol beis habad, then you bring them back down to the press. V'tochno berechaim, you go ahead and you put it in the press. V'nosno b'salin, then you put them back in baskets. V'shemen hayotzi mimenu zehaya rishon, and the oil that comes out, that's the rishon. Ta'an b'kor, then you put them back in the core of the press. Shemen hayotzi mimenu zehaya sheni, this was the sheni. Parak chazar v'tachan v'tan zehaya shlishi. Harishon lemenorah v'ashar lemenachos. The first oils are both used for the menorah. The secondary ones for the menachos. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lahaya tachnu berechaim ela kocho b'machteshes. Rabbi Yehuda says they would not put it in a mill, but rather again kocho b'machteshes. Kosho b'machteshes. For the hayatoin b'korah ela ba'avonim. Furthermore, they would not use a beam, but rather they would use stones. For the hayanosnan b'salin ela toch sivos hasal. Rabbi Yehuda says they would not pack them into baskets, but rather they would arrange them in the corners of the basket, on the sides of the basket. But Rabbi, for our purposes, what just came out of this? What came out of this is that halacha l'maisa, the way to read the Mishnah is megalgalo. Ultimately, again, when does the first harvest take place? Only when what? Only when all of the olives on the top of the tree were ripened. We do not want you going to the top of the tree, picking a ripe olive here, a ripe olive there, a ripe olive there, and not being able to harvest the entire tree. The first harvest was not done until we were sure that the majority of the olives on the top of the tree were ripened and ready for harvest. The Gemara just raises a kashir haguf akashya kotesh mani Rabbi Hudahi. The Gemara just points out over here that based on the brisa that we just read, it appears that the Mishnah poses an inherent contradiction. On one hand, the Mishnah tells you that I'm kotesh, that I go ahead and I crush it. That reflects the view of Rabbi Huda. Yet the Mishnah also said that I put it into a basket. That seems to go according to the Rabbanan. Again, in the brisa poses it a machlokes. Yet the Mishnah goes ahead and utilizes both of these opinions, to which the Gemara says, you're right. Hai Tana Sarvale Kavase Vechada Upale Gale Bechada. We'll say the point over here is that the Tana of our Mishnah kind of mixed and matched opinions. Ultimately, again, held like Rabbi Huda in one of the cases, but argued with him and sided with the Rabban in another one of the cases. Good. So we'll say, so the Mishnah now then goes on to the continue ultimately again with the oil. So we'll say what we just got from the previous Mishnah was an incredible insight. Into olive harvest, which was just quite fascinating in general, but also from a halachic perspective tells us something very interesting. 3 different olive harvests. Each olive harvest really produces 3 different grades of oil. A rishon, a sheni, and a shlishi. what the Mishnah teaches me is that what? The rishon of every single batch is kosher for what? Kosher for menorah. Sheni shlishi, kosher for menachos. Now we're going to continue on that theme. Look at the next Mishnah. Listen to this. Harishon sheberishon. This is really fascinating. Harishon sheberishon ein lemalehemenu. So both saying, obviously, the first press, what we'll call the first oil of the first harvest was obviously the most superior olive oil. That's the Rishon sheberishon. First oil from the first harvest. Ein lemalehemenu. Nothing better than that oil. That's supreme. Listen to this. Hasheni sheberishon, v'harishon shebesheni shaven. Now we're going to get into oil relationships here. So I will say, so the second oil of the first press, I should say differently. The second oil of the first batch, of the first harvest, that's the sheni sheberishon, the second oil of the first harvest, v'harishon shebesheni, and what? The first oil of the second harvest, shaven. They're the same. Now we'll say we're going to see what this means in just a moment. Hashlishi sheberishon. Something I will say, the third oil of, meaning the third grade oil of the first harvest. V'hasheni shebesheni, and the second grade oil of the second harvest. V'harishon shebeshlishi, and the first grade oil of the third harvest. Shaven. So we'll say. So you hear what this is saying? Number 2 of number 1, number 1 of number 2, and number 1 of number 3, right, are all equivalent, if that was helpful. Right, are all equivalent. Hashlishi shebesheni, I both say the third grade oil, right, of the second harvest, v'hasheni shebeshlishi, and ultimately again the second oil of the third harvest, shaven. Hashlishi shebeshlishi, ein lemate menu. I both say the most inferior oil is what? Third batch of oil from the third harvest. So again, the Gemara is just creating qualitative equivalencies, although not necessarily halachic equivalencies, qualitative equivalencies between the oils. The bookends are obviously the first oil of the first harvest, ein lemali menu, that is the highest, most superior oil. The most inferior oil was what? The third oil of the third harvest. So listen, now again, we're going to see what that means in just a moment. Af kol hamenachos hayibedin sheitenu shemen zayzach. Now, say now. Here's what we know. The halacha is say what requires shemen zayis zach. What requires ultimately pure olive oil? Menorah. So the Mishnah just says, but menachos do not. Menachos do not. What's the right? Menachos do not. Right. Because remember, what did we just learn 4 minutes ago? Right. They will say. So remember again. What did we see? It's only the menorah which requires the first pressing from each of the harvests. Menachos can be made from batches 2 and 3 from any of the particular harvests. So the Mishnah just says, Bedinu, I would have thought, I would have thought, Rabbi say that menachos also require shemen zayizach. They also require pure olive oil. So the Gemara says, why? Why would I have thought that? Because ma menorah she'en alachi latuna shemen zayizach. Because Rabbi say menorah, which obviously has no consumption component, yet what? Requires pure olive oil. So I would have thought, menachos she'en lachila. So we'll say, if something that is used for non-consumption purposes has to be pure olive oil for the menorah, right? Then I would have thought certainly something that is consumed, like the menachos, should certainly require shemen zayizach. To which the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar, Zoch kasis lama'or. Ve'ein zach kasis lamenachos. Therefore, we'll say, the Gemara says, it's a pasuk. What does the pasuk say? Zoch kasis lama'or. Ultimately, again, when do you need shemen zayizach? I will say only when? Lama'or. Lama'or means what? Ma'or ultimately means for the menorah, but ultimately, again, not for other things. Therefore, again, I only need zach kasis for the menorah, but I do not need zach kasis for the menachos. Good. Let's analyze this. Amud Beis. Shavin. So we'll say, now the Gemara is going to question the Mishnah. The Mishnah established relationships between the various types of oils and said that what? That essentially, for example, just a simple example of this, that we'll call second batch oil from the first harvest. First harvest, second batch oil is the equivalent to what? Equivalent to what? First batch, second harvest oil, right? So I will say, so that's the Gemara said. So the Gemara says, really? V'ha amrit, rishol l'menorah v'ashar l'menachos. Now 1 second, but that's not true. I will say, what did we say before? We said before in the Mishnah that the halacha is that the only types of oil that can be used for the menorah are what? Are the first batch from every single harvest. So what do you mean by establishing these relationships? To which the Gemara says, you're right. Amra nachar bar Yitzchak, my shaven l'menachos. Now both say, the relationships that we just said in the Mishnah are only relevant vis-a-vis menachos. When it comes to menorah, both say, the halacha is quite clear. Menorah requires virgin olive oil. Menorah requires first batch olive oil. Now again, you could create shemen zayis zach from the first harvest, second harvest, or third harvest. That's all fine. That's not a problem, but it always has to come from first. What are the relationships? You know, say the relationships are for menachos. So for example, I'll tell you what this means. What this means is, if you have in front of you, second batch oil from the first harvest, or first batch oil from the second harvest, which one do you use for menachos? Either one you want. Halachically, they're equivalent. But if you have, let's say, for example, first, second batch harvest from the. Let me give a good one. Yes, if you have a different combination, then you should go ahead. Let's say, so the idea over here is that halacha l'maisa, these categories that we created are not relevant vis-a-vis menorah, because menorah ultimately again could only come from first batch oil. It comes from first batch oil from any of the harvests, but halacha l'maisa, the relative relationships that we created between the oils are relevant vis-a-vis the menachos. Because I will say, here's what's interesting. What the Gemara is teaching, what the Mishnah is teaching, is something very important, which is even though menachos do not have the obligation of what? Shemen zayis zach, they do have an obligation in general by karbanos to always bring superior items for carbonic purposes. So for example, if you have multiple oils that came from different batches, different gradations of the batches, these relationships as espoused in the Mishnah are important. Why? Because you should always bring the best quality oil for the menachos. In other words, we don't say that once you're not shemen zayis zach, once you're not grade A, you're a nothing. It's not true. There are still, the rest of the gradations matter, because for menachos, always try to bring the superior oil. Good. So the Gemara says, Af kal menachos hayubedin. So it's actually a beautiful Gemara. Tan Rabbanan, zach, ein zach ela naki. But say, what does zach mean? Naki, which means pure. Means pure. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kasis. What does kasis mean, Rabbi say? Because remember, again, there are two ways that we describe the oil used in the menorah. Zach and kasis. So zach means pure, no impurities. Kasis means it's crushed, katush. Yachal yehe zach, kasis, pasal menachos. I'm going to have to now remember, these are both statements by the menorah. So by the menorah, Rabbi say, I need what? I need oil that ultimately comes. Zach is free of impurities. Kasis, Rabbi say, means katush, means pounded, as opposed to the beam being used. Yochli zach kasis pasal menachos. I'm going to have to say that zach kasis would not be good for menachos. Talmud Omar v'isaron soles balul b'shemen kasis. We'll say, interestingly enough, we see the word kasis used by menachos also. Im kain ma tamad lomar la ma'or. If that's the case, then why does the Torah goes out of his way to use the word ma'or to tell me that zoch and kasis have to be used for the light for the menorah? Ele mipnei hachisachon. So we'll say, listen to this. Rather, it's a cost-saving measure. What does this mean? Ma'im hachisachon. Rabbi Eliezer Omer haTorah chassa al mamonon shayisra. We'll say, listen to this. This is actually quite fascinating. What the Gemara is saying is as follows. We'll say, obviously, first batch oil is more expensive, right? Virgin olive oil is going to be more expensive than regular grade olive oil. So we'll say, listen to this. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu was concerned about was as follows. To go ahead and tell us that we have to use virgin olive oil, first grade olive oil, ultimately for the menorah. That's not such a big deal. Why? Because you don't need all that much oil for the menorah. Look at Rashi just a moment. Look at Rashi Kisayad for just a moment, the first wide line. The mincha shchichi kol yom ha'tuva v'ika chisarn imahader basar kasis. Aval meros leko shemen kulehai ela shlosha lugin v'chatzi b'chol yom chatzi lug v'chol ner. Also, listen to this. So the Gemara says as follows. Even though technically speaking, can you use virgin olive oil for the menachos? Can you use it?
Sure.
Of course you can. But halacha lemaisa, there's not an obligation to do so. Why not? Because I will say, the menorah only requires 3.5 lug of oil, which is not a lot of oil. So to tell you that you have to bring that amount of virgin olive oil every single day, we're fine with that. I will say there's a lot of menachos. Remember again, there's the minchas chavitin of the Kohen Gadol every single day. There are also other menachos that are brought throughout the day. If halacha l'maisa, you're going to tell people that they have to bring virgin olive oil ultimately for every single mincha, that could create. Now, what are we concerned about? What we're concerned about is supply and demand. What we're concerned about is if suddenly again there is a spike in virgin olive oil purchasing there. What does that do to the price? It drives it up. Therefore, in order to not go ahead and alter the markets, ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, virgin olive oil, which you need a relatively small amount for menorah, that we're makbid on every single day. But for the menachos, you don't need it. For the menachos, you don't need it. Rashi says, look at the next Rashi. So you say to yourself, who cares ultimately again if it's more expensive? To which the Gemara, so back to the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Elazar, HaTorah chassa al mamon sheYisrael. The Ribbon Shalom is very careful with our money. Right, very careful with our money. He wants to make sure that ultimately, again, things do not become too expensive for Klal Yisrael. So therefore, again, I will say, therefore, Allah Chalamaysa, Baruch Hu says, go ahead. We need this for day school tuition, right? We need this for tuition. But right. But anyway, to say halach lemaisa, the Gemara says over here that therefore you see the olive oil, the virgin olive oil will be necessary ultimately again for the menorah, which is only 3.5 lugin. But ultimately, when it comes to the mincha, you could use regular oil. So we'll say now the Gemara is going to give some beautiful agarata. Tzavis b'nei Yisrael b'yichoi lecha shemen zayis zoch. So we'll say, so the pasuk says, command Klal Yisrael, they will take for you pure olive oil. Shemen Zayis Zoch. So we'll say ultimately again, remember this is for the menorah. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Shmuel Silber, Eilecha velo li. So we'll say, interesting, the Gemara dashes over here, Eilecha, the light of the menorah is for you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, but not for me. Don't think that I need the illumination of the menorah. Lo la'ora ani tzarech. Ultimately, again, the light of the menorah is not for me. I do not need the light. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi Kisveyad. Rashi says over here, Eilecha, it's in the wider lines, about 6 lines in Eilecha. L'rtzoncha ulaharos chibascha lefanai. So we'll say, amazingly enough, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't think, you see, we'll say, the danger in the Beis HaMikdash is thinking that what? On one hand, the Beis HaMikdash is quote-unquote the earthly abode of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But don't think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs that home. Just like don't think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs the physical trappings of the Beis HaMikdash. So there's a candelabra, there is a menorah. So why is there a menorah? Because a home needs light. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't think the light is for me. The light is for you. What do you mean the light is for me? We'll say the light is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows His love for us. How does HaKadosh Baruch Hu show His love for us? And we're going to get ready for this. Shulchan b'tzafon u'min Rabbina was such a beautiful Gemara. Now remember again, the Shulchan was placed in the north and the menorah in the south. I will say now, why is that relevant? Why is the Shulchan in the Beis HaMikdash? So remember again, the Shulchan, the Beis HaMikdash is set up like the palace of a king. That's how it's set up. The Kodesh HaKadosh, the Holy of Holies, is the throne room. The Shulchan is mamish the dining room table. That's why you have the bread. You have the lechem upon him on the table. But we'll say, interestingly enough, the menorah and the Shulchan are on opposite sides of the room, of the Beis HaMikdash. Now remember, if this was an earthly abode, so where do you go ahead and place your menorah? Right by your table. But yet over here they're placed on opposite sides. Why? To show us that as much as this Beis HaMikdash is an earthly abode of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rebbe Shalom doesn't need the light. Everything in the Beis HaMikdash is for us. It's for God, but it's for us. And it's for us to show us the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Lo la'achila ani tzarech, v'lo la'orer ani tzarech. Remember again, the Shulchan is there with the lechem apadim, but don't think that I, God, need to eat something. The menorah is there that illuminates such beautiful light, but don't think that I, God, need the light. So we'll say, why? So who is it all there for? Ultimately, again, we're going to see it's there for us. Every single aspect of the Beis HaMikdash was there in order to show us how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. So, for example, the Gemara here is not going to say this, but the Lechem Apanim. How does Lechem Apanim show us how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us? How? The bread stayed fresh. an entire week. Remember again, we saw the Gemara that said that when the Oli Regel came up, the Kohanim would take the Shulchan, and what they would do, what would they do? They would take it out to the populace. You remember what they would say? See how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you. These breads were baked on Shabbos, and yet what? They're still fresh a week later. Why? Because God needs it. God needs it. God doesn't need it. It's for us. It's a physical manifestation of the Ribbon Shalom HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for us. So we'll say, now watch this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need the light. He doesn't need the menorah. Varaya. I asked them, the bayis, chalone shekufim atumim. Supposed to listen to this. When Shlomo Melech made the Beis HaMikdash, so he made the windows shkufim atumim. So listen to this. Shkufim means wide. Atumim means narrow. So we'll say, what does this mean? Now the back changes this. It's shkufim mi bachutz va'atufim mi bifnim. They were wide on the outside, narrow on the inside. Under normal circumstances, you would make windows just the opposite. You would make it narrow on the outside, wide. I mean, you can make it wide on both sides, but you can make it narrow on the outside, wide on the inside. Why? Because that way, again, it allows the inside to be flooded with light. The Beis HaMikdash was just the opposite. It was wide on the outside, narrow on the inside. Why? To show us that ultimately, again, the illumination of the Beis HaMikdash was miraculous. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need the light. He generates the light for us. Lo li'ora ani tzarich. Michutz la'paroches ha'idus ba'o ha'moed. Eidosu l'chol ba'e olam sha'ashchina shora b'Yisrael. Ultimately, again, on both sides, the fact that the Beis HaMikdash was always illuminated, despite the fact that there wasn't a lot of natural light, all there was what? Was the menorah. That's the eidos, that is the sign. Kadosh Baruch Hu lit up the Beis HaMikdash. He illuminated the Beis HaMikdash for us, not for him, he doesn't need it, but for us as a physical manifestation of the love he has for us. V'im tomar the ora ani tzarich. So maybe you'll say, no, Kadosh Baruch Hu needs the menorah, he needs the light. Isn't that beautiful this is? Remember again, all 40 years that we walked in the desert, all 40 years that we were in the desert, remember again, we traveled by whose light? By his light. There was his Eish. Ella Eidos hu l'chol ba'eolam sha'ashchina shora b'Yisrael. Rather, Rabbi say the menorah was not there because HaKadosh Baruch Hu required the illumination. Rather, again, the menorah was the most incredible testament to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu resided within our midst. How does the menorah araya that HaKadosh Baruch Hu resided in our midst? My edusa amarabba ze ner ma'aravi. We'll say ultimately again, the testimony that HaKadosh Baruch Hu resided inside our midst was the western candle. And I both say, Rashi points out over here that the Ner Ma'aravi in fact was the middle Ner of the menorah. Remember again, the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash had 7 branches, 3 that kind of, well, it's a machlokes how exactly the menorah was fashioned, but it was 3 and 3 and 1 in the middle. The Ner Ma'aravi, Rabbosai, Rashi points out, is the middle Ner. Rashi says, Ner Ma'aravi, Ner Emtsoi. It's called the Ner Ma'aravi, ultimately, again, because the lip of it extended towards the Ma'arav, extended towards the west. But say, what was unique about the Ner Ma'arav? Listen how beautiful this is. Shenostin bo sheme kineged chavrosel. So remember again, the Ner Ma'aravi had just as much oil, right? One log, a chatzi log of oil, the same amount of oil as all of the other, we call them neros. It's not a candle, remember, it's a receptacle. It had as much oil as the other receptacles. Umimena hayamadlik, both say the Ner Ma'aravi was the Ner that you started with, and yet what? Uba haya mesayim. Yet Rabbi say the next morning when the Kohen Gadol came to the Beis HaMikdash, look at Rashi just a moment. Mimena haya mesayim ha'tava baboker. The next morning when the Kohen would come to go ahead and clean out the receptacles, the cups, so to speak, of the menorah, and to put in new oil, new wicks. Yet, what did he find? So I'm sorry. Ha'tava boker sha'osa yametiv acharon lefisha kol boker matzah osa daluk. So we'll say, listen to this amazing, amazing miracle. The Ner Ma'aravi was still burning the next morning, even when the other Neros went out. We'll say, how could that be? They all had the same exact amount of oil, but rather, again, it was Dolek Benes. It was burning, it was a miraculous burning. The Ner Ma'aravi was burning, there's a machlokes. Was there oil left in the Ner Ma'aravi? Was it just that it burnt its oil slower than the other candles or the other receptacles, or was it just that there was a miraculous fire burning in the Ner Ma'aravi? Either Rabbi side, to be honest, it actually makes absolutely no difference. At the end of the day, it was a miraculous fact that the Ner Ma'aravi was always burning. It had to be extinguished, ultimately, again, by the Kohen to be relit. So Rashi goes on with the rest. So we'll say, ultimately, again, we'll say, so the menorah, specifically the Ner Ma'aravi, was the greatest testament to the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us. The menorah was not there to illuminate for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The truth is, the menorah wasn't even there just simply to illuminate for us. The godless of the menorah, Bosai, is that it was a physical manifestation of divine love. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said the Ner represents so many things. The Ner represents Torah, the Ner represents the Neshama, the Ner represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Ner represents so many different beautiful things. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu showing, I am here within your midst. I am here dwelling with you. I am here by your side. The menorah's power was not in its illuminatory capacity, but its power lay in the fact that it was a constant reminder to the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our daily lives. Beautiful Mishnah. Let's just do this Mishnah. Now we've done everything regarding oil. Now we transition to wine. Where would they bring the wine from? So the Gemara says, Kaduchin va'atulin afaliyayin. The cities of Kaduchin and Atulin, these were the places which produced the greatest wine. Shnei Lahem, both say secondary, more second grade wine, came from where? Beisima u Beis Lavan Bahar. Ukfar Signa Babika. So Beisima, Beis Lavan in the mountains, Kfar Signa in the valley. Kalaratzos Hayiksheros. So in reality, you could bring wine from wherever you want for the Beis HaMikdash. Elamikan Hayimavin. But I will say, but the Mishnah is just telling me where they actually did bring it from. So you can bring wine from anywhere. But ultimately, again, these were the places that they actually brought wine from. Ein Mavin Lo Beis Hazon. So we'll say same thing as we saw by the Shemen. You cannot bring wine from fertilized vineyards. From fertilized vineyards, or from irrigated vineyards. We'll say, nor can you bring wine from vineyards that had seeds planted in between the rows of vines. Vim heavy kosher. But if you did so, ultimately, again, it will be kosher. Ein mavian halistion. This is actually quite fascinating. You can't bring halistion wine. What's halistion wine? If you look at Rashi kisses out 6 lines from the bottom. Halistion, yayin masuk machmas hashemesh shayutolin es hanavin lashemesh. We'll say, you know what this sounds like? Late harvest wine. You could not bring late harvest wine for the Beis HaMikdash. So wines from grapes that were left out to age longer in the sun. Can't bring late harvest wine. Them heavy kosher. But if you went ahead and you did, ultimately again it's kosher. Ein mevi and yashan. You can't bring old wine. Again, we'll discuss what this Rashi says. Now yashan means mishal ishtakid. You can't bring wine from last year's crop. Devi Rebbe. The Chum say yes, you can. Ein mevi and lo masuk. The say you can't bring sweet wine for the Beis HaMikdash. Now Rashi points out over here, masuk is hainu me'elo. So we'll say, as opposed to hilistion wine, which was purposely aged in particular, meaning the grapes were arranged in such a way that they stood out in the sun longer. Masuk just means naturally sweet wine. You can't bring naturally sweet wine to the Beis HaMikdash. V'lo ma'ushan, from smoked grapes, right? Grapes which were smoked, or ultimately v'lo mavushal. We'll say you cannot use mavushal wine. We'll say actually we're going to see all these halacha lemaisa. You can't use mavushal wine ultimately in the Beis HaMikdash as well. Vim heavy, and if you used any of these wines, pasul. Ultimately, again, any libations, any nesachim you brought with these wines will be pasul. Ve'ein mavian min hadloyos. Ella min haraglios. We'll say it's actually interesting. You cannot bring vines. We'll say delayos means vines. Rashi points out that were arranged on a trellis. So you cannot bring grapes from hanging vines, but rather they had to be vines ultimately, again, that were lying on the ground. And nor can you go ahead and bring from vineyards which were avudim, which were worked. We're going to see what these means. Velo konsin also bichatzovin. We'll say now, after you press the grapes, now the Mishnah is transitioning. Up until now, we'll be speaking about what type of vineyards you could bring the grapes from. Now, once I have the grapes and I'm pressing them into wine, what type of items, receptacles, could I put the wine into? You should not put the wine into large barrels. Rather, you should put them into small barrels. Furthermore, you don't fill up the barrel up to the top of the barrel. This is actually very interesting, because you want it to be that when you open up the barrel, the aroma of the wine wafts. Is that the word? Wafts. Right? It wafts. Right? It comes out. So in other words, we want an area that the aroma has the ability to collect. Furthermore, when taking the wine from the barrel, you never take from the top of the barrel. Kamachan literally means grain granules. What it actually means over here is mold. Some amount of mold some amount of spoilage tends to rise to the top. Therefore, you don't take wine from the top of the barrel. So where do you take it from?
Middle.
Right? Thank you. Right? Peizayin, top of Peizayin. V'lo mishulaha. Nor do you go ahead and take it from the bottom of the barrel, because of the dregs. Ella maybe mishlisha me'amtsa. Rather, you take from the middle third of the barrel. So what they used to do is as follows. It's interesting. So what they would do is, how do you get the wine from the third of the barrel? You put a spigot right over there in the middle. So they would insert the spigot by the middle third of the barrel. So we'll say, this is fascinating. Again, we're going to read it today. Read it today, understand it tomorrow. So let's say, so watch this. So what would they do? Ketzad hu bodek hagis. So ketzad hu bodek hagis. So say, so how would they extract the wine and make sure that we're getting the right wine? Hagiz bar Yosef v'hakana biyado. So we'll say you had two guys. We'll call them, one was the spigot guy and one was the gizbar. The gizbar was the person in charge of the Beis HaMikdash, temple treasurer. So what would happen? So the spigot guy is working the spigot, right? The gizbar is sitting there with a reed, like a little stick. What would happen? So the spigot guy would open the spigot. Zarak hagir. So we'll say, when you first bring out the wine, so some initial froth would come out. They would get us the right amount of wine. When they got out the right amount of wine, hekish bekana. The gizbar would tap the spigot guy on the shoulder with the reed and tell him to turn off the spigot. Now, I will say, what's fascinating about this is as follows. They would not talk when extracting the wine from the barrel. Well, that's why, again, the gizbar had the reed to tap on the guy's shoulder to tell him to shut off the spigot. Why they wouldn't talk when ultimately they were extracting the wine, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, sheyesh bo k'machan pasol. Rabbi Yehuda will say, Rabbi Yehuda, the transition a little bit back before, if the wine has any granules, spoilage granules in it, the wine is pasol. Shnei emar, temimim yihu lachem u'min chasam, temimim yihu lachem v'niskehem. So we'll say ultimately, Rabbi Yehuda ben Yossi just kind of echoing what we said before, that the wine itself has to be temimim. The wine used for the nesachim has to be temimim, not just the din of temimos doesn't just apply for the mincha, but it also applies v'niskehem, for the nesachim, for the wine libations, and therefore again halacha l'maisa, the wine must be free from any impurity. Alright, well, so stop over for today. We'll pick up here tomorrow night session. Do I have to do anything?
Yeah.